I want to show you the two differences between the options in this pattern. The one in the video is the narrow cable that's more in the center and isn't as wide. The other option in the pattern is a wider cable. Now our background stitches actually remain the same. All we're doing is opening our circle 2 rows below instead of 1, and we're going to close 2 rows above instead of 2. So it's just one simple adjustment in the pattern to get a wide cable versus a narrow cable. And that's up to you which one you want to choose, or go ahead and make both. These are really quick. Let's start the infinity ear warmer on round 4, since the first 3 rounds are just simple single crochets. So to start round 4, we will chain 1 and single crochet in the first 2. Now we come to our very first opening curve. To do an opening curve, we will skip 2 stitches and then go down 1 row. This stitch right here is the stitch that will help us do the opening curve. So we will be working into this stitch. We will yarn over and do our first front float double crochet into that stitch. And now we will do a second front float double crochet into the same stitch just above the one we just created. Now we will go back and single crochet in the 2 stitches that we skipped, because we will actually never be skipping any of our background single crochet stitches. What this does is leaves us with no gaps and a more beautiful back and a more consistent gauge for the background. Now we will single crochet into the next 2, and we're going to complete this opening curve. If you turn your work just slightly, I find it easier to work this. We will now be doing front float 2 double crochet again. We yarn over and we're going to work into the top front float stitch, the one we just finished before, and we will do a double crochet into the base of that stitch. And now we will once again do a double crochet into the base of the other front float stitch. And that is how we complete an opening curve. Let's do that again. We will single crochet 4, and now we will count over 2 stitches, down 1 row, and that's the stitch we will work our opening curve into. We will do 2 front float double crochet stitches into that spot. We're going to go back and work the 2 that we had skipped over so that we're not skipping any stitches on the background. Work the next 2. Once again, kind of turn your work, and we're going to work into the base of those front float stitches we just created to connect them and have that nice opening curve line. And that is all it takes to do an opening curve. We'll just repeat that around. And as you can see, we kind of have some bumping going on here. We see that it's a little bit bulging. That's okay. That's what it's going to look like on this round. The next round will fix that. So come on right back. When we come to round 5, we start to notice something, and that's that we have a little bit of bulging here, which we're definitely going to take out on this round. And also that when we finished round 4, we had 2 different stitch counts. We had our single crochet background stitch count, which will remain the same throughout the entire pattern. And then we also have our floating stitch count, which is why on some rounds we're increasing our stitches because we have the floating stitches, but we're not actually changing the gauge or the size of the item because the background stitches remain the same. That's important for round 5. Let's see why. We will chain 1 and single crochet 2. When we come to our first set of 2 floating stitches, we are going to skip them. They will be unworked and floated on the front. So we'll skip those 2 and work the very next single crochet. Now we want to make these stitches tightly together. We don't want to add any gaps, but we don't want to pull it so tight that it puckers. Then we will single crochet into the next 3, And once again, we come to our 2 floating stitches. We will skip them and allow them to float on the front by working the very next single crochet stitch, which is why on this round we see our stitch count only be single crochets once again. No floating stitches are worked on this round. They are simply sitting and floating on the front, waiting for us for the next round. So complete that around, and then we'll be ready for round 6. Now that we've completed round 5, we can see that the top is evened out. We have these beautiful popping opening cables that are sitting on the front of our design, and we're ready to start into round 6. We will chain 1 and single crochet into the first 2. Now this is where we start to do our crossing to make that very beautiful pattern. But our very first crossing, we're going to be doing half of it now and half of it when we come back to the end, because we will be working over this join area to keep the pattern consistent. So what we will do is we will single crochet in the first 2, and now we're going to work across the join into the floating stitches from round 4. We're going to yarn over 3 times because we will be working 2 double trebles. So we will work the front float double treble by working it into the very first. And I want to show you something really quick here. When we work post stitches, normally we take our hook and we go around the entire stitch and then we complete our post stitch. But when I do infinity crochet, I prefer the look of only grabbing 1 to 2 strands of that stitch versus all of them, because it seems a less bumpy transition between stitches. It's smooth and nice. So there's our first double treble, and now we will do our second double treble around that front post stitch on the other side of our join. Now you want this cable to lay flat. You don't want it to bulge too much, and you don't want it so tight that it's pulling. If this is bulging too much, take away one of the yarn overs and just do a treble crochet. If it's pulling tight, add another yarn over and do a treble treble. Now we're going to let this cross sit, and we will finish it when we come back to the end. So we want to move forward. We will single crochet into the next 4. And now here is where we are going to work our very first full cross. Now this is called a front float 2 double treble 4 stitch cross, left cross. Now that's a mouthful, but don't let it scare you. It's just describing what we're doing, and it's really not that difficult. So what we want to do is skip these first 2 front float stitches, and we're going to work a front float 2 treble crochet into these 2 front float stitches. So we will yarn over 3 times, go into that front float stitch, complete that double treble, and now we want to do it again to this front float stitch so that we have 2 right together. Awesome. Now, without skipping anything onto the background, we are going to work a little bit behind these, and we're going to single crochet in the next 4, but we don't want to make sure that we skip anything. All of our single crochets will be worked. After working those 4 single crochet, now we're going to complete this as a left cross, which means we will be working over these front float stitches that we just created. We're going to yarn over 3 times, and we're going to go back to these front float stitches that we skipped. I find it easy to kind of turn your work, and we will work the first one, and then the second one. And there we have our very first cross. Without skipping any background stitches, we will single crochet 4, and then we're going to do that again. So we're going to skip these front float stitches. We're going to do a front float 2 treble crochet around these. Lots of yarn overs happening here. Then we will single crochet 4. And now we're going to work over those front float stitches we just made, and we're going to connect to these 2 front float stitches that are just sitting by doing a front float 2 treble crochet to create that 4 stitch left cross. And it's called a 4 stitch because there are 4 stitches in between the 2 sets of front float double trebles. And now we've just completed another cross. It will get more determining lines as we do our next round, but we can see that it's happening. We can see that this is crossing. Complete this step until the end, and then we'll show you what to do on that very last one to complete that crossing cable over the join in our work. Now that we are at the end of round 6, we're going to finish that first cross that we had only done part of it. We still have 2 single crochets unworked, and we're ready to finish this cross. Now, since all the crosses that we're doing are a left cross, we want to keep this one as a left cross also. So we will yarn over 3 times and work underneath this cross across our join, and that first front float stitches that we had not worked before, we want to insert our hook, working behind the stitches we already created, finish that front float double treble. And then go ahead and do that one more time for that other one that's just hanging out there that needs to be completed. And then we will work our 2 single crochet on the back and join to the beginning. So now we've got that one completed and everything is very consistent. Moving on to round 7, this is once again a round where we will work the background single crochet stitches, but we are going to skip all of the front float stitches. So if we chain 1, we work the first 2 single crochet, and then we've got these 2 front float stitches that we just skip and allow them to hang out and float on the front, and single crochet in the next 4. We've got these 2 kind of hiding out behind here. We will skip those and go to the next single crochet, working that one a little bit tighter than the others, but not too tight. And then we just continue this throughout the round, skipping the front float stitches and single crocheting in all of those background stitches. Evens it out and lets us see that cross even better. Now that we have completed round 7 and evened everything out, on round 8 we need to be able to connect these front float stitches so that it completes the closing curve. That way we have a nice flowing pattern. In order to do that, we will be working 4 post stitches together and essentially dropping them so that they are no longer worked on the other rounds in this project. This will also count as 1 single crochet stitch. So let's start. We'll chain 1 and single crochet into the first 4. Now the next stitch that we work will be the closing curve, and it will count as one single crochet. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 front post stitches hanging out. To close them, we will yarn over and go to the third front post stitch, and we will begin a double crochet, but we want to stop with 2 loops on the hook. And now we're going to yarn over and go to the second front post stitch, and we're going to work a double crochet, and once again we will stop with 2 loops on the hook. This has combined the very inside curve. Now we want to connect the remaining 2 front post stitches to finish that outside curve. So we will repeat that again. Yarn over, we're going to go to the 4th front post stitch, and we're going to complete a double crochet but leaving 2 loops on the hook. Yarn over, go to the very first front post stitch, and as you can see, I turn my work as I work this because I find it easier. And we will complete this double crochet once again, leaving 2 loops on our hook. Now we have closed the top. We will go into the very next single crochet, and this is where we create the 1 single crochet stitch. We will yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, and go through all 3 loops on the hook. This will count as 1 single crochet, and we have our closing curve. Let's do that again. We will single crochet 7, and now we will be working a closing curve with the next 4 front float stitches. We'll go to our 3rd stitch by skipping these first 2, leaving 2 loops on the hook. We'll go to our 2nd stitch, leaving 2 loops on the hook. We'll yarn over and go to our 4th float stitch, leaving 2 loops on the hook. We will yarn over and go to the very first floating stitch. Now leaving 2 loops on the hook, we will insert into the very next single crochet, pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through all 3, and then continue on. And that is how we close our curves. Now that we have our closing curves completed, round 9 is super simple. We're just going to single crochet into every single stitch. So you should go ahead and give yourself a pat on the back because you just completed an infinity crochet method ear warmer. So as you can see, as we crochet up here to give a little bit of space there, we've got this beautiful cabling lines that were worked this way. We didn't have to do any crazy joining or have a break in our design. Our design is all the way around and so much fun.